Disney really knows what they're doing when it comes to getting people's attention and making stories that matter. When they're doing their best, they can very easily create stories that mean something. Once upon a time, it was time to sit down and put in those earbuds so as not to disturb the neighbors, because it was Off Book, a show about Broadway, movies, TV shows, and so many other nerdy things. Enough of that. I'm Mark Stoufer III.
I'm Hailey Briggs. Today's episode is all about Disney movies, what makes them such classics, and how they're changing as the years go on.
I think it's very interesting that Disney has kind of become its own genre, even to describe some non-Disney movies. And there aren't many kinds of movies that can do that. It's remarkable how much of a pop culture staple they've become, even as they continue to change.
I know it's weird because you're like, oh, I'm going to watch a Disney movie. You don't say that about like sci-fi movies. You're like, oh, I'm going to watch like whatever. And Disney is like its own category at this point because they have so many movies.
Yeah, I think that I really don't know what it is about them that make them so long-lasting, so endearing forever. I think that part of it is just the fact that it's one of very few companies and studios that can make family-friendly movies that are actually good. Because I think that you find movies that are good, but that not the whole family can watch, and then you find movies that the whole family can watch, but aren't necessarily that good. And I think that Disney, at least the most consistently out of their competitors, can find that balance between having something that's entertaining and also something that everybody can watch together.
Right, and it's like, I think it's because their first movies, I think the very first Disney movie was Snow White, right?
Mm-hmm. That was the first feature film.
So there's like Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella. Those are like all like classic fairy tale stories, and then Disney turned them into movies. Made them family friendly because some of them aren't family friendly.
Yeah. Don't go read the originals with your kids. Be like,
oh, it's reading time.
But no, don't do that. Just off-book PSA right there.
I was gonna say, I think Cinderella, like at the end, like spoiler alert, this is the actual story, not the Disney story. The stepsisters like get their eyes poked out or something by birds.
Yeah.
So like that's obviously not in the Disney version,
mm-hmm.
but.
Yeah.
First off, what's your favorite Disney movie?
That's a hard question. I think for me, it's always been a tie between Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. I love both those movies.
I do like them, but mine is like hands down Tangled. Like I will sit and watch Tangled like a little 5-year-old. I will sit and pay attention. You give me snacks, you give me a drink, and I'm all set for like 2 hours or whatever, how long the movie is. I was gonna say, ironically, it's like the most like bubbly and like almost like childish, but it's the most gruesome actual story.
Oh yeah.
So I actually learned this from half Into the Woods and half reading about it. So Rapunzel, it's the whole story. She's locked away in a tower by Mother Gothel, basically, and the prince finds her, climbs up the tower, and gets her pregnant. And then one time the witch finds out that the prince is coming in. She pushes him out of the tower. He falls into like thorn bushes. He goes blind. And then Rapunzel is banished to like a desert. She has like twin babies, and then the prince finds her, and they cry because they haven't seen each other in so long, and it heals the prince's blindness, and they go back to the castle and kill the witch.
Just a little bit different than the Disney version.
Just a little bit, but
just
like
a tad.
That's where they get like her magic tears from, and like the long hair. And I'm just like, how can you research like how? I just can't believe they can spin it that much to make it work.
Yeah. I think it is interesting that Disney seems to have found a formula that really works. You have the main character, they almost always have some sort of love interest. You have the animal sidekick available in stores everywhere and on shopdisney.com. And I think that the fact that they're able to take that formula and find a way to make it work well every single time. I mean, there aren't many films that can make a film with the exact same formula, but still find a way to keep it fresh and new while still maintaining that merchandise and those story elements. If that makes sense.
Right. And there's some of them that don't work as well, in my opinion. Like, there are some Disney movies that I could honestly care less if I watched.
That's fair. I mean, they're not all going to be
Perfect,
amazing.
right?
Right.
Like, so I recently watched Soul, which is one of the newer Disney movies that came
Right.
out either right before or right after the pandemic started.
I think it was supposed to come out before and then they delayed it.
Yeah, because I was working at the movie theater. I used to work at a movie theater, and I would like know when all the releases are. And it was supposed to come out in June of 2020, and it didn't
Right.
because, pandemic. But I recently watched it. Amazing movie. I absolutely hated the ending. Have you seen it?
Yes. That's
okay,
fair.
Spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't seen it. So basically the whole movie is this guy dies. He's trying to get back in his body instead of going to the great beyond. And so and then he accidentally goes to the great before, which is like all these souls trying to get to Earth. But there's this one that doesn't. And so they go on an adventure trying to figure out like how to get him back in his body. And it's a whole thing. But they just left it on such a weird note.
Yeah.
To me.
I think that was a good plot point. I just don't like the fact that was the last one. Like, had that been a part of the story and then they went and... It seems like they had a good story going and then they just kind of ended the movie. And it's like,
right.
Okay, that doesn't really feel like it's a conclusion, though. I understand what they were trying to do with, like, an open book is what he's going to have now. But, it feels like you had a trajectory, but it continued through the end and you removed the end, it almost feels like.
Yeah, so again, spoiler alert, he ends up getting back in his body, and then it just ends.
Yeah.
So you don't really know what happened to the little soul that got to go to Earth. They didn't want to go to Earth, but then they went to Earth. You don't know what happened to them. And then it just ends with him, like, standing. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, he's just
I was hoping they'd show... Yeah, he was like, I'm just going to live my life. And I'm like, okay, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I was hoping they'd like show him like teaching again or something and like actually being patient with the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely seemed like they were going for one of these open-ended endings, but the story up until that point didn't really set one of those up because they had these story threads set in motion that you kind of needed to wrap up. And so if you wanted an open ending, then write a story that would have lended itself to that or end the story. But they kind of wrote a story that needed an ending and then just didn't write one.
I don't like open ending movies. It just makes me mad because I'm such a I need to know person, and then I don't get to know. So I'm just like, what's a movie that what Disney movie that you're like, okay, I could care less if I watch this, because I know you and your family are huge Disney fans.
I'm trying to think. This isn't exactly what you asked, but it may just be because I've seen Frozen 18,000 times. That's a good movie, but it's not that good movie. I actually like the sequel better, which is apparently an unpopular opinion because everyone hated the sequel. I actually thought it was a pretty good movie. Frozen was pretty by the numbers for me, and the music was okay. So I think it was an okay movie, but I don't think I'm ever going to watch it ever again now because it's been ruined since I watched it 80 times in one day.
It's because you have a little sister, isn't it?
Yeah, she was obsessed with Frozen when it first came out. So we listened to the soundtrack all the time. We watched the movie whenever we could. And
I remember being in, when did it come out? 2013 now?
Yeah.
So I was in junior high. So I wasn't in middle school, but I was in junior high, and some of the girls were obsessed with it. And so I remember when Let It Go was played everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Literally everywhere. You were in the store, you heard it. You were in your car, you heard it. You were sitting in class and you heard it.
I heard it playing in one of the speakers downtown, like the outdoor speakers.
Yep.
It plays the music. That was in the downtown music loop. I'm like, why? What?
I don't know. It was a good song, but I didn't think it was that good. You don't hear you didn't hear any song from Tangled being played that much. I don't know why it was so popular. I don't know if it was because, oh, forgive me if I say her name wrong. What's the one that plays Elsa?
Adele Dazeem? No, it's Idina Menzel.
Idina Menzel, yeah. I don't know if it's because she was popular on Broadway and it became popular or what. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. I don't think even the writers know, because when you watch Frozen 2, you can tell that they have no idea what made Frozen popular, so they just try to
They
keep
don't.
doing everything over again. The soundtrack to Frozen 2 is such just like a collage of random genres because they had no idea what made Let It Go so popular, so they're just like,
what if we try everything and something might work?
which is honestly why I like it better because they tried different things, and I think that was fun to see them try new things because they didn't know what worked the first time, which is unusual for Disney.
Exactly. It's like I hear that song sometimes and I'm just like, why? Makes me want to cry sometimes because I just have flashbacks to when it was played over and over.
Don't cry. Just let it go.
Well, that's the end of our episode. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like I don't like when a movie is like all twists and turns sometimes too. It's like it's almost predictable for Disney at this point because obviously the main character has to have some issues.
Yeah.
You can't be a Disney character without having issues.
Of course.
Okay, so I googled Disney movies and it brought up Camp Rock 2 for some reason.
I mean, technically, but that's another episode entirely because we've recorded an episode about Disney Channel original movies. You should go watch that after you watch this.
For example, Toy Story. Okay, that's what it is. I love Toy Story to death, but it did not need 4 movies.
That's fair.
I actually never watched the 4th one.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good for what you're expecting. The cinematography is amazing. The plot is kind of by the numbers.
It should have ended at 3.
Yeah.
Because
4 is a good movie. It just doesn't really need to exist.
Like, spoiler alert, Andy gives away his toys to a little girl, and that should have been it.
Yeah.
Get it together, Disney.
Yeah, come on, Disney.
They seem to like to add certain, like, keep going on certain like movies for Disney. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, they definitely know what the movies that are popular and want to get as much as they can out of those franchises.
Toy Story, Frozen, Lion King, 101 Dalmatians has like 2 or 3 movies, and now they have Cruella, which I heard was a very good movie.
Lady and the Tramp had a bunch of them.
I don't like that movie.
I think it's okay. It just didn't need 18,000 sequels.
Right, yeah. Exactly. But there's also like the non Disney princess movies, which I like a lot. Like Big Hero 6. That was one of my favorite. That was back in 2014. It makes me feel old, but that's one of my favorite non-Disney princess movies. Because when you think of Disney, you think of all the Disney princesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, but what about the other side? Yeah. Like there's obviously like Lilo and Stitch, she's not a Disney princess, but there's like, did you know that there's like a certain like categories they have to hit to be considered a Disney princess?
Oh yeah, there was a whole film theory episode on that. This is the second week in a row we've talked about film theory. That's odd. No, but there was a whole episode trying to figure out exactly what lets you get into the Disney princess franchise, and it's really weird. Okay, the character must have a central role in an animated Disney or Pixar film. It must be human or have a humanoid appearance. It should not be the star of a sequel. It must be royal by birth, or by marriage, or do a heroic deed in cases of Mulan. It should not have been an overwhelming success or an underwhelming failure, like with Aurora. And the character must have massive appeal and recognition towards viewers and audiences. Which are the most bizarre things ever. And also purely profit-based.
Exactly. It's so weird because like I didn't realize they would have like requirements.
Right.
Like some are like, it's a huge debate whether Mulan is actually a Disney princess.
Yeah.
Which I think is weird. Because it's like just make her a Disney princess.
I mean, she technically is if we're using equivalent status symbols in the cultures.
Yeah, and it's like she literally saves all of China.
That too.
But it's also completely different from what they do in the other movie, which I think is another topic for a different episode.
That's fair. It is interesting though that they say that the character has to be a royal, either born or through marriage, except for Mulan, and it's weird that they make
because technically she saves all of China, and her and Shang get married, so
That's
he's like
fair.
of like some high superior because he's a
Yeah.
general.
Those requirements do kind of seem like they were made backwards. Like they knew what characters they wanted to make princesses, and then had to go find a way to create rules that specifically let those in and not other ones. And the fact
Well, and
that
people were like,
Let these people in.
and they're like,
Oh, well, I guess we can.
yeah, well, and the fact that one of the points is that the movie had to be good but not too good, it shows exactly they know exactly what they're doing when they make these movies. They know what people are going to like, and they know exactly what they need to make and what they can capitalize on. So it's not a surprise when we're going to get Moana 2 eventually.
oh my gosh, Moana is such a good movie.
That is really good.
So funny story. I got my eye surgery back in 2017, and it was an outpatient. So I went in the morning, and I was back at my house by like 2:00 in the afternoon. And that was the day Moana came out on Netflix.
Okay.
I sat and watched Moana 7 times in a row
Wow.
because I was so drugged off my mind that
Well
I was
deserved.
like, let's watch Moana multiple times. And it was just such a good movie. It was funny. So I
Yeah.
guess this is what my mom told me. I don't really remember any of this. Because I was, again, very, very drugged out. But so it's a good movie. It's like one of my like top 3. It's like Tangled, Moana, and The Princess and the Frog.
That's fair. Yeah.
Because they're
Yeah.
unique. I don't know.
Right,
I feel
right,
like the
and-
original
yeah.
princesses are just very like, this is the issue.
Yeah.
A prince saves them.
Right. It seems an awful lot like they're taking that format that they know works, but adapting it to make it something that feels different and new while still retaining that kind of familiar quality. So it doesn't feel brand new, but it does feel different and fresh.
Right.
And now it's time for an advertisement. Today's episode is sponsored by the parents of Tarzan.
Well, no.
Today's episode is sponsored by the parents of Anna and Elvis.
No.
Today's episode is sponsored by the parents of Cinderella.
No.
Okay, today's episode is sponsored by the Committee to Save Disney Parents. There are a lot of casualties. Go to www.savedisneyparents.com to donate to the cause.
Disney parents have actually been dying less recently.
They have, haven't they? That's an interesting point. I mean, a lot of things have been changing with Disney movies as we have moved into the more modern era.
I think it's probably because they saw how we got affected by all the parents dying in the movies.
That's fair.
So all these little kids are like, they're dead.
Yeah. And I think there is something to be said about the fact that when you kill a Disney parent in every single movie, it's kind of starting to be less impactful because you know that it's coming. Like you see a parent in a Disney film go,
Oh, okay. So they for what, 5 minutes tops?
Right. And it's like, Soul, no parent. Well, his dad was dead, but like they didn't die during the movie.
right. In Moana, the parents died, but it was part of a vision. So that's like half points to you, Disney. You didn't actually kill a parent, but you had to just sneak one in there. didn't you?
Tangled, her parents weren't dead.
Oh, yeah.
She was just kidnapped.
Well, but then her mother Gothel died. So that's like more half
well.
points.
She
You
was
know.
she was a kidnapper. She would have
Yeah.
she probably would have been hung anyways, so
I mean, I do think that Disney's kind of breaking away from that kind of traditional,
I'm a princess, and then look, a prince, and I'm gonna be saved by a prince.
which I think is perfectly okay because we've had enough of that story. We understand the story. You don't need to keep rehashing it over and over again.
right. And now with like women trying to be like empowering and stuff, and I think Disney's part of that. It's not like you don't always need a prince to save you. And they kind of did that with Elsa.
Yeah.
Elsa never had like a guy or a girl or anything.
Well,
And she was just kind of her own entity.
yeah, and even Anna, who had a prince, ended spoilers, ended up being the villain, and then the guy that does stick around for the sequel spends the entire sequel trying to figure out how to propose because he doesn't know what to do. which I think is a nice reversal of the trope where
I'm gonna swoop in and save the day.
and he spends the entire movie trying to figure out how to not be nervous around the female that actually knows what she's doing instead.
Lilo and Stitch, though, that when I found out, so they don't explicitly say how their parents died. So I don't know if you know this, but you know Pudge the fish that she feeds every day,
Mm-hmm.
and how she says it controls the weather.
Yeah.
Apparently, I don't know if this is a theory or if this is confirmed by Disney, but apparently her parents died in a bad car crash because it was raining and the weather was bad. And so she feeds Pudge every day so the weather's not bad.
Uh,
Isn't that
sure
sad?
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Because she's like 5 or 6 in the movie.
Yeah, huh. That's upsetting.
Disney always has depressing moments somewhere.
Yeah. Wreck-It Ralph had a pretty good one. I don't know if you've watched the movie when because in Wreck-It Ralph it's set inside a video game, and so there's like a game called Fix It Felix Jr. and so you have to be a repairman fixing windows that Wreck-It Ralph breaks, and then Wreck-It Ralph doesn't want to be the villain anymore, so he goes to another game to win a medal. It's a whole thing, but he ends up in this like basically Mario Kart, but it's just candy. It's called Sugar Rush, and the king candy says that if the game ever gets unplugged, this other character named Vanellope, who is a glitch somehow, will be killed alongside the game, and they show full on the game getting unplugged and all the characters running out of the game, and then she's just stuck there pounding against the walls of the game, and it's like, why do you have to torture us emotionally like this, Disney? Can you stop being so good at that?
The amount of times I have cried from a Disney movie is immense, but I'm also a very emotional person when it comes to movies.
Yeah, I usually, but I am in movies.
Like, I cry at Winnie the Pooh. If it's
That's
too
fair.
cute,
That's
I
fair.
cry.
What did you think of the Christopher Robin movie, live action?
Oh my
sequel?
gosh, I loved it.
I
The
thought it was
live
really
action
good.
one,
Yeah,
I loved it so much. I cried.
I thought that did a really good job showing how they can take that story that everyone knows, and I kind of turned it into something that's new but still feels familiar. I think that's kind of indicative of what they've been doing with most of the films, is that they found a way to take this story and make it feel, I don't want to say modern, but you know, these people that have grown up with the story, telling them a new story that still feels like it could have been one of the original movies.
Right? And so I actually grew up watching Winnie the Pooh. And now
Mhm.
years later, I have a story about Winnie the Pooh. And it's
Yeah.
like, it made me very happy when it came out.
And that cast was just brilliant.
Now, what do you think, moving away from Disney princesses again, and kind of doing, this was kind of a whole new genre for Disney when this movie came out. The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh yeah,
That is one
that's
of my favorite movies of all time.
very underrated.
It's, so for the people that don't know, it's about a young emperor named Zuko. He has an advisor named Yzma who wants the throne basically, and so she tries to kill him, but instead turns him into a llama. And
You know,
then he has to.
how you do that?
So, there's this peasant named Pacha that they have to work together to solve both their problems. It's hilarious.
It's really good.
Like, it's so funny. And it's not anything that Disney, like, you would have thought Disney would have came out with. You would have
Mhm.
thought it was like a separate company or separate entity.
Yeah. I think that
Also-
Disney's really good.
It came out in 2000.
Uh,
It makes me
Hmm.
feel old.
yeah.
It was
No, but
sad because the pandemic stopped so many like Disney movies from coming out,
Yeah.
and now they're like catching up. So like the Raya movie, I
Yeah.
honestly can't remember what it's called, but
Raya and the Last Dragon.
yes, that one. That one just came out. They're moving away from like their typical formula, and so I wonder how that's going to work out for them.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting that they're making all these movies that are breaking the formula, but the same studio is making these live action remakes that not only tells the same kinds of stories they've always been telling, but does it in a way that's not as good as the originals. So you have these classic movies that everyone goes, okay, these are good, but it's the same story over and over again. So they say, okay, we'll give you some new movies and also those exact same stories, but with worse CGI. It's like,
I was gonna say,
why?
I actually like the Aladdin remake.
Okay. Okay.
So, yep, I know. Just hear me out. So
Okay.
I know it was a big thing at first that Robin Williams could not do Genie, which everyone was absolutely like irate about because
Mhm.
no one can replace him, no one blah blah blah. I think Will Smith did a good job for the position he had to fill.
That's
And
fair.
he explicitly said, I am not replacing Robin Williams. I am not trying to do it like Robin Williams. I am putting it in my own way.
He definitely did give the character his own feel and his own spin.
And the
I'll give him that.
casting to me was immaculate. I loved it. It was so good.
Okay. Yeah, the cast was pretty good.
So, and I liked some of the songs that they put a spin on, and it was cool to see it live action. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but
Yeah, I actually recently rewatched the animated one, and looking at it through the lens of the original, I got so excited about what a potential live action film could look like. And obviously, I'm not saying that I'm better than Disney or anything, but looking at the moments that were in the original and how almost none of them got translated well, at least in my opinion, to live action, it just felt like a missed opportunity to me. Will Smith did a good job with the genie. I don't like his interpretation, but he did create a good one. I think objectively, he tried to kind of create a new character that, especially when you consider that the original was played by Robin Williams, that's pretty impressive. The cast was pretty good. I just don't think that they did all the things they could have done.
right. I do agree with some of it that some of it was very like at some points, but I thought it was pretty decent for one of their first movie remakes.
That's fair. What do you think of The Lion King?
I actually haven't seen it because I just heard it was so bad.
You don't need to see it. It's okay. It's not that good at all.
I was gonna say I heard it was not the greatest in the world, so I was like,
It's not.
what did you think of? I think one of my favorites is Maleficent.
I haven't seen
They
that one
did
in
an
a long time.
immensely good job on
Yeah,
those 2 or 3 movies that I think 2 movies.
I think so.
Yeah, 2 movies. One I cannot stand though, Cinderella, the one that came out in 2015.
Yeah,
That was atrocious.
yeah, that's fair.
Like, what were they thinking?
You know, I don't even know. I mean, they
I
were
get it
thinking
was
that
their
everyone's gonna go see
first.
it.
I get it was their first live action, like remake, but like, holy
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah. I think that the best ones even are just okay, and I think that it's because they know that people are going to go see it no matter how bad they've heard it is because they want to see it. Like there are very few people that just won't. Even with something like Lion King, people want to see, is it really that bad? Oh, it really is that bad.
I heard Mary Poppins Returns was one of the bigger ones that was loved
That
by
was
people.
that was pretty good actually, but I think it was pretty good because it wasn't a remake; it was a sequel to the original movie, but they were doing new things with it. They weren't just trying to retread the same plot points with
Right.
subpar CGI.
Brings me to another point. Do you remember the controversy behind Mulan?
Yes. I don't know everything about it, but I do know kind of
So
the basics.
basically, for those people that don't know, when they announced the Mulan live action remake, people went livid when they came out with details. It goes by the actual story of Mulan. It does not go by the Disney version. So there is no Shang, there is no Mushu, there's no
There's no
singing,
music. No music.
which is why people were like,
Okay, how is this a Disney movie then? Because there's at least has to be like a soundtrack or something.
which I don't think there really was.
Not really.
So it's still like going in for her father for the war, but there's no like love interest. Translation was off for some of the story points, and so people were mad. It was just kind of a fail, apparently, in some people's eyes. I actually haven't seen it. I never really bothered to see it because people were saying it was so bad, but
Yeah. It
I don't know.
it
It,
seemed like they were trying to take the best moments of the animated film, but combine it with the original story. But the animated film relied so heavily on the music, and they took out the music, but didn't like replace it with anything. So we just had these giant plot holes where you like, I don't actually know anything about any of these characters because in the movie they sang about their desires, and now they're not. So they're just like cardboard cutouts that you can only understand if you've seen the original, which I think is a pretty good pattern that they've set, where you only really enjoy the movie a little bit if you've seen the original, because that's all it's doing is just trying to get you to remember how much you like the original movie.
Exactly. And they actually just announced a new live action remake. Take a guess at what it is.
I don't even know at this point. It could be literally anything.
They're doing Snow White.
Of course, there. That's yeah.
And they announced who Snow White is going to be. It's
I
going to
did hear
be,
about this.
drum roll, Rachel Zegler.
I think it's
She's a
Ziegler.
big Broadway. She's about to play Maria in the upcoming remake of West Side Story.
Which looks so good.
I know, I've heard it's really good. I don't know. This should be interesting because that is the first Disney movie,
Yeah.
or like first big hit.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting that you have, at the same time coming out, in between each other, you have these movies that are breaking the mold and doing new things and telling new kinds of stories in ways that seem familiar but also new. And you also have these live action remakes that are just retreading the story and aren't that good and nobody likes, but they keep making for reasons. Marketing, it's money is the reason why, but
Exactly. Like at this point, I think they're just running out of animation ideas, or they want to keep doing the live action remakes. But either way, I'm still gonna watch Disney movies. And I'm still gonna be a Disney fan who hasn't been to Disney. So
yeah. No, I think that Disney really knows what they're doing when it comes to getting people's attention and making stories that matter. And I think that when they're doing their best, when they're doing things that they're passionate about and telling new stories, I think that they can very easily create stories that mean something and that all of us can enjoy for, decades. And they really found a way to create timeless content.
Exactly. And I think it's gonna be from years to come that Disney's gonna be a huge staple.
Yeah.
Hopefully, anyways.
And now this magical journey comes to an end, unless you feel like binging old episodes of the show.
Next time, we'll be talking about another kind of movie that's become its own genre with Marvel movies and what makes a good cinematic universe. The show will exist in the universe until next week, and probably beyond, but this episode is over.